Okay, so let's talk about chapter 2, which is competitiveness, strategy, and productivity. So, from the chapter 1, we introduced what operations management looks like. Now we're going to move on to more strategic move. Okay, and competitiveness, and strategic move or strategic formulation and productivity. Okay, think in terms of what those each element represents. um, Competitiveness and strategies are more conceptual or generating the bigger picture, but productivity is more specific. So we're going to get into some methods or calculation that we can talk about. So let's move on to competitiveness. So competitiveness is defined as how effectively organization meets customer needs compared to as competitors. So it's all depending on your competitors, right? So you're going to be always ahead of your game compared to other competitors. So typically, what we're looking for is marketing features so that we try to find out what customers want, pricing, promotion, and operation side. You're looking at the product or services itself. You want to have your design higher quality. You have a service which is unique, and delivery, customization, flexibility. Those things are operational side of competitiveness. We when it comes to the competitiveness and strategy, we have been using Southwest Airline a lot because of its very specific strategies they are focused on. One is low costs, the other is reliable delivery time. So they want to make very clear those two strategies are they're always looking for. Okay. And number two, why some organization fails. I think it can be a little bit trivial, but that's what the book talks about. Need to look at the big strategy first of all. Then, based on the strategy, you want to have tactics or short-term goals align with your strategy. And also talks about investment, right? Investment in people or equipment. In other words, technology. But sometimes it's not easy to do. You're gonna have to, sacrifice one or the other, one over the other, right? Because you can't always have both of them invested. So in that regard, there's always move from companies, whether they're gonna lay off people or they're gonna kind of skip the latest technology they may have. So depending on their strategy, you can go with one or the other, not both most of the time. Also talks about mission, goals, hierarchical planning. I think it's something management, the principles of management and principles of marketing talk about a lot. How to set your mission, how to set the goals, strategy, tactics, operations. I think it's pretty much principle in terms of the concepts, right? But however, it's a hierarchical. You need to set the higher level first, which is goals, strategies. Then you're going to talk about day-to-day operation, which is tactics and more specific execution of those tactics. Okay, so that's the kind of hierarchical planning for your strategic move. Then now we have core competencies and strategic move. That's another thing the book talks about. And for example, a company knows their strengths very well, but you want to focus on your strengths rather than weaknesses to be competitive. A good example would be Toyota's core app competencies or strengths, which is a lean manufacturing. So they're gonna focus on very specific thing rather than just having so many things are in the line, so that they can get rid of those wastes, or they want to minimize the time costs, and they're going to maximize their productivity. So that's what they wanted. Toyota wants. But if you try to do something against your core strengths, that's not what you want, right? For example, you want to invest in other areas, or you're going to have a diversify your supply chain rather than having a very lean, uh, manufacturing system, then you are against your alignment between your strengths and strategic move. Okay, then other things that we see quite often in this kind of hierarchical structure is SWOT analysis, right? Which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay, that's the kind of one of the most uh, popular analysis that we use often in business, so that you come up with problems and things that you want to improve. Then you see the opportunity by looking at external, internal. Then you come up with some sort of recommendation, right? So that's what we do. Actually, we do in classes, right? There's a project discussions and all that, but that's what happened in real world as well. So they're always trying to look at their strengths and weaknesses, compare with opportunities and threats, which is external. Then you go from there. I think a good example is right here in ride sharing industry, right? Like Uber and all those companies. So they talk about critical factors when it comes to the analyzing your strengths and weaknesses. It's order qualifier. That's what they use the term to show the minimum standards. Okay, so that your customers are kind of comfortable with. Okay, for example, business riding sharing industry, you're looking at GPS tracking, mobile app, and transparent pricing. Those are something that you're looking for as a minimum, right? So that customers are comfortable with. And whoever achieve those minimum and go beyond, those minimum, then can be a winner. Like Uber is trying to do all those things in the first place and go beyond it. So Uber's the user interface, right? And very short waiting time. Those things are kind of give them a edge to be very competitive. So those are the things in SWOT analysis we typically look for. Those qualifier, which is again minimum, and then if you go beyond those minimum and go above all other competitors, then you can be a winner. All right, strategic types. Supply chain sustainability and global. Actually, I think it's a globalization or a global position. Right, so that's something many companies are looking at, especially times like this. Is a very confusing time because of tariff, because of all those protectionism against each other. But you want to diversify your supply chain, because it's really confusing where your supply side is safe or not. You don't know until you get it, right? So that's something many companies are looking for in terms of supply chain strategy. And I think is Walmart is doing always looking for diversification when it comes to global supply chain, because that what they're looking for is low costs, right? So that's something always trying to achieve so that they can have a close relationship with uh, their suppliers. And other types of strategy, sustainability. Again, sustainability is not always like top priority for some companies. However, Unilever, which is one of the global companies, always look for uh, opportunities to be, to be kind of a leader in the sustainability because they produce a lot of, for example, plastic packaging and plastic materials. They are looking for always reducing those plastic materials or packages or just water uses because again they consume a lot of water for uh, their product and production system. Also, we have time-based and agile strategies. That's I think this the middle of chapters talk about time-based and agile strategies and trying to reduce the time take to deliver values, whether it is in production development, delivery or responses to issues. I think this is aligned with the lean production that Toyota has been always talk about, right? So that they can reduce the time, reduce the production cost, reduce the time to deliver their inventory. And the latest example I think I heard is Zara, which is a retail, clothing retailers. So they always try to look for the time take from the design to the deliver to their customers in the store. And I have very specific time. I heard that like 2 to 3 weeks from design to delivery of their product, which is very short, right? Short time. So that's I think that's a good example when it comes to the time-based strategy. And then we have balanced scorecard. Again, in the chapter, Kaplan and Norton talks about balanced scorecard that has four-dimensional uh, views for performance in terms of financial, customer side, internal process, and learning and growth. Again, this can be kind of trivial because you can say other things rather than financial, customer, or those four things. You can say uh, probably alliance uh, with your other companies or other sectors are pretty important because times like this you want to have a good relationship with other industry, other companies that you can have a good relationship so that you can improve uh, you can improve your performance not only in your sector and other sectors because many sectors are interconnected, right? But they specifically talk about financial, customer, internal process, and learning and growth. And also they, not sure this coming from the textbook, but uh, talks about example of hotel industry. Okay, this is an example right here. Hilton or hotel, they track guest satisfaction in terms of customer and training hours for the employees and also they measure or they keep track of room turnover time. That's very important. Uh, Also the vacancy time, because it's another measure. So those are the kind of what they call balanced example of balanced scorecard. Then we have productivity. That's another. I think it's one of the uh, main idea of this chapter. Productivity. What is productivity? Productivity is a little different from efficiency. So you want to be clearly measured by using output and input, right? Because there's formulas given right here, but in terms of output and input, it can be different units for different product and services. Right? So that's kind of a little bit confusing, but that's the main thing. You want to measure productivity, then you want to talk about output, then you divide by input. And why productivity matters. So pretty obvious that you want to have a higher productivity because we can lower the costs and you can have a competitive pricing because of a low cost, of course. Then it'll give you higher profit margin, not automatically, but generally can lead to the higher profit. And then in turn, you can have a increased investment opportunity. Okay, so that's why productivity is important. The types of productivity measures. Well, depending on how many or what kind of input you have. So what we call partial productivity is when you have only a single input, right? So the example will be the formula is like this, right? Formula is whether you have single or multiple, but in this case again single. You have a single type of input, you have single type another input which is material, single type of input which is energy. So pretty straightforward. You're gonna use a division to come up with productivity. But when you have a multiple factors, okay, multiple places, the easiest way is just add them up, add all those input on the divisor side, and that's it. So you're gonna have output, then divide by all input that you want to calculate into. So your output is this amount, then you have a labor, materials, overhead, that's in terms of dollar amount. So you then add them up, then you divide by output, then it'll give you the unit per dollar because your divisor is dollar amount, right? So that's the per dollar, all right? So that's the measuring productivity. What about productivity growth, right? In terms of percentage, how much your productivity grows over the years, for example, from last year to this year, or last 10 years, or next 10 years when it comes to the forecasting. So growth rate is just taking new product, taking old product and subtract from new product, okay, which is same thing as a new product minus old product over old productivity. I should say productivity, right? And because you want to show as a percentage and multiply by 100, that'll give you percentage. But when you use the Excel, probably you don't have to multiply by 100. Just give this, then it'll give you uh, the decimal places, then you just show it as a percentage. All right. Anyway, so that's it's like a word problem in your, eighth grade or ninth grader, right? In math. So the new year, old year, and divide by the original number, right? That'll give you the change, change from old to new. So in this case, we have 5%. All right, so that's a pretty quick and simple calculation for productivity. But again, like I mentioned, this can be math word problems, right? But the math itself, calculation itself, formula itself, it's not that bad, pretty straightforward. But understanding and put it into formula can be a little bit challenging if you kind of forgot, or if you, you know, if you didn't do lately. But we're gonna have to practice a little bit. All right, service sector productivity. Okay, that was a product productivity, usually. But in terms of service sector productivity, measuring it can be challenging sometimes, right? Because may not be actual numbers, can be intangible rather than tangible outputs, or can be very variable, right? Depending on season, depending on situation, that's what we call contextual, right? Circumstantial. So that's why measuring productivity in service sector can be a little bit challenging compared to uh, product productivity. And also they talk about process yield. Okay. In manufacturing, process yield measures good output over total input. Okay. So you want to measure only the valid output. Those output are canceled, output are not valued, output is not satisfactory, cannot be measured. Okay. And service yield is contextual. Like I mentioned, service yield can be kind of circumstantial, right? Because all depending on, right? So uh, depending on what you're going to measure, then you can use different type of call, whether it is reserved or whether it is just complaint call, depending on what you're going to measure. So I try to come up with some important ideas of this chapter. Not necessarily again the PowerPoint laid out. So if you have any questions and problems, let me know so that we can talk about those issues. See you next time.